All right, we have some people piling in here. That's great. If anybody wants to just share where they are dialing in or joining from and your practice area, we'll try to make today's discussion as relevant and focused as possible. Share some data around just expectations or lead volumes and benchmarks, things like that. If not, we will use generic information and we'll call out some practice areas and have Bo and Kate share everything that they can. All right. That was 1 minute. I think we reward the individuals for showing up on time. I think, all right, a couple more coming in. But while we do this, you want to just do a quick introduction, Bo, Kate, who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about the companies you're representing?
Or Kate, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Kate Schenkel. I'm a partner and co-founder at Very Decent Marketer. We're a legal marketing company headquartered in Philadelphia with a specific focus on digital. But we work with people all over the country.
Very cool.
And Bo Royal here, CEO, co-founder of Pareto Legal. We specialize in digital strategy, advertising, and conversion rate optimization for law firms. So we're going to talk about a lot of those things today.
Awesome. Appreciate you both joining me with today's discussion. You know, we've had calls like this before where we're talking shop, and we thought it would be a good idea to give people a little bit of insight behind the curtain about like the conversations that we're having. So hosting today, I wanted to just ask a lot of the questions that my clients are consistently asking me. And for anybody that isn't aware, I'm the founder and owner of LegalFenix, which is a legal marketing consulting company that offers fractional CMO services. So a lot of my clients are constantly coming to me asking about vendors that are acting in their best interest, that have market competitive rates, that are also providing incredible products, which is why I have Bo and Kate joining me today. So we're going to set the stage first just so that everybody can have an understanding about, what it is that we're talking about. We're talking specifically about paid search advertising, Google ads, and Google local services ads. So there are obviously differences between each of these ad units. Kate, if you can get us started and talk about like what those differences are, and then really how should law firms decide which ones to prioritize? I think that'll get us going.
Yeah, sounds good. So with traditional Google ads versus LSAs, there's really two big differences. The first is the way Google monetizes them, right? So traditional PPC is pay per click, right? When someone clicks on your ad, Google has made their buck and they're happy. With LSAs, local service ads, it is a pay per lead model. So Google doesn't make money unless they actually generate a lead for you. So with the LSAs, it's a lot more interactive with Google as far as you giving feedback, you rating the quality of the lead that came in and whether or not it's relevant to your company. And if they generate a lead that really isn't relevant, they'll also credit your account back. So you can make some money back, which is not possible with PPC. They've actually done away with a lot of the features that let you dispute leads or give super specific feedback, but they still technically are allowing you to rate how their product is doing for you. So that's difference number one. And then difference number two is for a PPC campaign. Like if I have Kate's law firm in Pennsylvania, I can still run a PPC campaign wherever I want. I can target any geographic area. Whereas if I want to do a local service ad, I need to have a physical location where I'm running it. So I could only run an LSA in Pennsylvania if that's where I have my brick and mortar location. So those are the two big differences. As far as which one you should prioritize, it really comes down to the firm and the individual practice areas as well as their geographic location. So in general, what I have found working with PI firms is that the cost per acquisition for auto leads tends to be a lot lower using LSAs as opposed to the traditional PPC. I think part of it is LSAs are now the first thing that you see in the search results page. So it's the first place people go. And then the other thing too with LSAs as opposed to the PPC with auto is the cost per click for auto terms is just so high, like 3 to 4 to 5 times higher than any other kind of practice area campaign. So with auto, I would always go LSAs. Other practice areas, I still think traditional PPC is a good place to start.
Awesome. Real quick, Bo, before I let you jump in, everyone, I am working on trying to get chat enabled. I apologize. Admittedly, this is the first go around of managing it, so we'll try to get it working, but appreciate the patience. Bo, you want to jump in there, talk a little bit more about how you help your clients prioritize which ones to use?
Yeah, sure. I agree with everything Kate said. I think other differences, real quick, are pay per click. You're going to have significantly more control over what your ads are showing for, down by the keyword level, by a geographic perspective, by an audience perspective. Local services ads, you really don't have much control at all. It's a big black box. You literally just pick the practice area, you pick the geography, you pick a budget, and a bid, and then you're really at the mercy of Google, serving your ad. I would actually recommend, if you're able to drive lead volume through LSA, start there. In our experience, overall, the lead quality from LSA is much better versus pay per click. There's a few reasons for that. Kate mentioned one, LSA served at the top of the Google search result pages, so you're going to be getting, the cream of the crop in terms of the traffic. The other thing, though, is LSAs are driving phone calls and phone calls only. So thinking about the intent of a user, someone that's ready to pick up the phone and speak with an attorney, they're kind of ready to go. They're ready to sign up with someone versus pay per click. It can drive phone calls, but it's also going to drive website traffic, form submissions, live chat, so on and so forth. So if you can get LSA to run, you're probably better off initially prioritizing the budget on LSA. And then once you hit a point of diminishing returns, or you've hit a point where you just simply can't spend any more on LSA, then I would say it's probably a good time to start reallocating more budget to pay per click.
So that was already one of the pre-submitted questions about how can we actually get LSAs to work. But before we get in there, I could tell you the feedback that I get from a lot of my clients is the frustration over the fact that within LSAs, you don't really have any of the levers to pull where you do with ads. Like, so you talk about the lack of control there, even though you are getting more quality. Whereas with ads, you're targeting and who you're going after, whether they're top, mid, bottom funnel. Can you talk a little bit how like you address that within ads, since that is going to be at least a benefit for some people that want to have a little bit more control?
So sorry, can you reword the question? So can you say it again,
Some of the
Ron?
levers that we're able to pull to improve our performance on ads aren't available within LSAs. So some of the things that you can do, whether it's like maximizing for conversions or top of page placement, like can you talk through the options that ads give you that you don't really
Versus
have in
versus
LSA?
LSA?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for ads, you can target by the specific keyword, which gives you control over budgeting by practice area, right? So if you want to spend, excuse me, you have a $100,000 a month budget, you want to spend 30K on med mal, 30K on motor vehicle accident, and 40K on slip and fall, you have complete control to do that. You can target people by device type, you can target people by age, gender, household income. You can day part the campaigns, which you can also do in LSA. You can run various different ad formats in Google Ads. You can run a text ad, you can run a YouTube ad, you can run a display ad. So there's a lot more levers and buttons you can push within that platform. LSA, I already mentioned, I'm going to say it again, like you can only really pick what predefined practice areas that Google gives you the option of selecting. So, if you're a personal injury firm, there's going to be a drop down menu of the specific subcategories within personal injury that you can select, and that's it, right? Um, on top of that, from a budgeting perspective, you can't tell Google in an LSA account, I only want to spend 50% of my budget on personal injury and then 50% of my budget on, med mal, right? Whatever budget you give them, they're going to spend that however they see fit. So you have to be really intentional with the practice areas that you're selecting. You really need to make sure that it's the type of practice area you want more and more leads from, right?
Sure.
So those are, in a nutshell, some of the fundamental differences from a control perspective of the differences between Google Ads and LSA.
It's a perfect segue because then to build on that, we're talking about budgeting. So, Kate, like when you're talking with your clients, like in helping them determine what that budget should be for either of those platforms, what are some of the key considerations as part of your discussions with them?
Sure. So, in an ideal world, a client will have historical data that I can look back on and see, like, hey, what were you running previously? How were the metrics looking there? And that's kind of gives a good starting point. But for a lot of people, it's either a brand new campaign they want to start, or the account was active like 3 or 4 years ago. So the data really isn't relevant anymore. So I would say if you're starting from scratch, the best thing to do is utilize Google Ads Keyword Planner. It is not a perfect tool by any measure, but what it will do is give you an average range of cost per click from the lowest average to the highest that you can get for whichever keywords it is that you're interested in. So, what I will do is go through, select the initial keywords that I think our client should start with for their campaign. And then I will budget as if every single click is going to cost the max amount of money. It typically won't, but it's a good way to make sure all of your, the bases are covered and you have enough minimum budget to get started. So I'll look at what the highest average cost per click is going to be. I'll multiply that by 10. If you're hoping for like 10 clicks a day, here's what you would need to make that happen. And then that's what I'll recommend for a daily budget. And then you can multiply that by 30 for monthly. But it's a good way to get some kind of baseline if you don't have that historical data to look back on.
Over to you, Bo.
Yeah, so I think if you're in the budget planning phase, you're not running ads yet, and you're trying to figure out how much you could or should allocate, you first need to, I agree with looking at Keyword Planner, getting a sense of the cost, but you need to go into it, figuring out how many leads, qualified leads and cases that you expect from this amount of investment. What is your target cost per case going to be? What's your time horizon for that investment? And then most importantly, are your goals and expectations realistic? So again, going back to what Kate just said, like go use the keyword planner, figure out how much monthly traffic you can drive from a given practice area keyword within a given market, understand the associated costs with that, and then do some napkin math to understand if I drive 100 of these clicks in this market, well, that's going to cost me 20,000 bucks. What's the expected conversion rate on that traffic, meaning clicks to leads, and then what's going to be the close rate. And every firm uses different terminology, and forgive me if I'm not using your firm's specific terminology, but close rate meaning of the total leads that you're generating, how many are turning into cases, right? So you need to like have some benchmarks in place to understand those ratios, and then apply that to the cost data to figure out, is my expectation realistic? Like if my budget's 20K for Google Ads per month, can I really expect 20, motor vehicle accident cases? Probably not. That's just going to be cost prohibitive, right? And then on the note of costs, this stuff can be really expensive, right? And as I mentioned before, these cases can take a while to monetize. So you also need to have a financial conversation with your controller, your CFO, whoever's in charge of the books, and make sure that you have the necessary cash flow and or cash cushion to make a consistent investment over a long time horizon, right? Because I've seen it too often where firms are like, I'm going to test PPC, I'm going to test LSA. They turn it on, 2 months go by, 3 months go by, they've gotten cases, but then all of a sudden the controller's like, what happened to the cash balance? Like, we're spending all this money now, we're not monetizing it yet. Like, if you're, a DUI attorney, the turnaround time on that case is going to be much quicker versus someone that is generating a motor vehicle accident case that could take 18 to 24 months to monetize, right? So you need to have some conversations about the finances too. It's not a sole marketing conversation. Anything that's budgetary related, anytime you're thinking about spending incremental dollars on a new marketing tactic, you need to make sure that the CFO is involved with that conversation.
Yeah. And to that point, if you are on the fence about whether or not you're ready to jump into Google Ads, you need to make sure you have that you're willing to hang in for, I'd say, at least 6 months, right? Like, do you have enough runway that you can run for 6 months? Because, like Bo said, a lot of times what I'll see is people will start a campaign, they'll give it 6 weeks, and they'll be like, well, it's not working. PPC doesn't work for me. They'll turn it off. They'll have wasted a lot of money because the campaigns are not going full force yet. And so it's not a great way to actually see whether or not you're capable of generating leads through PPC. You have to be willing to give it more time than I think you would probably want, but that's the reality of where Google Ads is now.
Yeah, that's a common misconception too, where like I talk to a lot of law firms and they're like, well, SEO is the longer term play, so
Mm-hmm.
we're going to give that, 12 to 18 months to figure out. But PPC, I should expect immediate results. And there is some truth to that. You should expect immediate clicks and traffic. But like if this is your first time running Google Ads and you don't have a historic data set to reference, it's going to take, for some of these practice areas, it could take 3 to 4 months to even reach a point of statistical significance to make a change in your advertising campaign, right? Like the other thing I'll say too that I see firms do is, they launch pay per click and within a week or two, they start making changes. And it's like, how can you confidently make, a change in a campaign if it's only gotten 4 clicks so far? That's not
Mm-hmm.
nearly enough data to make an informed decision off of. So I totally agree. I think 6 months is like the minimum
Mhm.
to give your firm a fighting chance at getting the channel figured out. Anything less than that, you're going to be making decisions off of data that's just simply not useful.
Not going to hold you to these recommendations, but we have two firms in the chat right here. One is Divorce in Ohio, the other is Elder Law and Estate Planning in Northern Kentucky. So if they were considering an ad campaign, and let's just say ballparking, expecting anywhere between 2 or 3 cases, maybe a month, like how would you approach that? What type of recommendation would you give those firms right here? Kate, want to start?
Yeah. Well, I guess one question would be, have you run campaigns before? And if you have, definitely look at that data. If you haven't, do basically everything that Bo and I had just talked about, right? Use Keyword Planner to figure out what search terms you want to be appearing for and do some napkin math to figure out how much budget you would need to get started. Another good thing you can do is just Google like elder elder law attorney or estate planning near me, see what's coming up, see who else is appearing for those search terms, both with LSAs and with the PPC results. This is especially helpful for LSAs because you can literally click a drop down and see a list of everybody, right? Almost everybody who is running ads for that practice area. So you can do that. And if there's a handful of firms that are running there, then that's probably a good place to start, would be with the LSA. If it's, neither of you are an MVA firm, but like if you ever Google auto accident lawyer near me, you can scroll for hours with all of the different LSAs that are running. So those would be my recommendations.
I agree with everything Kate said. The thing I will add, you said, Ron, it was divorce,
Divorce,
elder law, and
Ohio, Elder Estate in Northern Kentucky, and then we also had someone, an employment firm in Minneapolis, and a PI firm north of Seattle.
okay, for the first three, everyone except the PI firm, I would say also launch retargeting on Google Ads. Those practice areas have longer sales cycles. It's not like personal injury or motor vehicle accident where someone gets injured, they need an attorney right away. With something like estate planning, that's a slower decision, right? So a tactic like retargeting is actually a lot more valuable for a firm like that because they might have hit your website before, they might have engaged with some of your content before, but maybe they haven't contacted you yet. In that case, you want to drop a cookie on their browser. You want to serve them an ad over a 14, 30, 3 month time frame to keep educating them about estate planning or about, family law or whatever the practice area is. Get them back on your website, get them on the phone with your intake team. Those tactics, they typically aren't going to spend nearly as much as a LSA campaign or a non-brand campaign, but the quality of traffic that you're generating from a tactic like that is much, much better because these people have had some prior interaction with your content, right? Like based on their web behavior, it's clear that they are probably in the market for, an attorney like that, right? So again, everything Kate said, but launch retargeting too. You can't do retargeting on Google Ads for personal injury. It is just something that no firm is able to do. You can do it on other ad networks like Meta, but for estate planning and for divorce, family law, you can run retargeting on those platforms, on Google Ads specifically.
Yeah, with employment and estate planning, where the buying cycle is likely extended and it's much more research driven. I completely agree. I have gotten pushback from family and divorce firms around retargeting because obviously if the spouse is unaware of what is about to come down the pike, they don't want to use a shared computer and unfortunately be served with ads for divorce lawyers and family law lawyers. Personal injury, hear you. I know a lot of firms that are still doing it on more social networks, not as aggressively, obviously, with paid ads. Real quick, just to clarify, there was one question, Garrett. So the differences here are your local services ads are going to be the ads that you see with the headshot. They usually will have the green check mark for Google screened, whereas the Google ads are those sponsored ads where we'll say sponsored or ad next to it. And the difference is just you are paying per phone call on the LSAs, and then you are paying per click on the Google ads. So moving forward, Bo, if you want to jump in here, we did talk about budgeting. When we are looking at specific practice areas and really like structuring the Google Ads campaign, like how do you do that to align with like their specific goals and then like their ideal clients? Like, what are the conversations that you're having with those firms to make sure that the campaigns are built in a way to meet the objective?
Well, you just said it. Like that's how the campaigns need to be structured, based on the client's objectives, based on the firm's objectives, right? Like there isn't some reigning like cookie cutter campaign structure that's going to work for every single law firm. There's an initial structure you could start with, and I can give you kind of like the 101 of that. But at the end of the day, the campaign structure initially depends on what the law firm's goals are. And then over time, as more and more data is collected, that campaign structure will evolve. You will get more insight in your target market with your practice area of focus. And you might decide, if you're a Ohio firm, oh, we need to break out our campaigns by, since like Cincinnati needs to get its own campaign, right? Because it's eating up a lot of our budget. Those are insights that you will gain after you run ads in a market for a given period of time. But typically, for anyone starting off, we're going to recommend segmenting the campaigns by practice area and or by market, depending on the size of the budget, the goals, so on and so forth. But I want to kind of put a disclaimer on that. Too much segmentation can stunt the growth of your Google Ads account. Going back to what I said before about statistical significance, if you have 200 campaigns running and like each campaign only gets a couple of clicks a month, there's only so much that you can do with that information, right? And more importantly, Google uses a lot of automation to find better audiences with your ad budget. And if you're only feeding a campaign a couple of clicks a month, it's going to take Google's algorithms a very long time to figure out how to deploy your budget more effectively. So my disclaimer there is like there is a point of diminishing returns as it pertains to segmentation. I think for a small budget to start, less campaigns is better. But then again, over time, as you collect more and more data on how the channel is performing, you might realize that it makes sense to break things out more granularly based off of geo, based off of practice area. It could be by device type too. You could break it out by. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I agree with everything Bo said. And then the one thing I'll add is after thinking about your company, right, and what your goals are and what your main objectives are, also think about your potential client and the user and the searcher, and specifically where they are in their like buyer's journey, right? And that is really helpful when it comes to breaking out ad groups and coming up with copy for your actual ads. So, like, what I call it, my name for it is like people in the information gathering stage, and then people who are in the ready to file stage. So, information gathering is going to be a lot more long tail keywords, people who are like, why should I hire a car accident lawyer? What's the statute of limitations on filing a workers' comp case? You know, what can a personal injury lawyer do for me? Things where they're not quite ready to hire a lawyer yet. And with that, I have found it's effective to use like a softer sell in the ads, right? Talk about how you're there to educate them, you're there to help. It's free to reach out, you're not locked into anything, consultations don't cost anything. Have like a lighter touch and kind of serve as more like a guide and an educator for those people searching. And then for the people who are using the shorter, punchier, like high intent keywords like divorce lawyer near me, work comp attorney for lawsuit, like the people who are ready to file a case, right? Ready to buy, right? You can go in with the harder sell and talk about why you are the firm that they want to hire. You know, like biggest settlements in state history. You know, we will fight for you, we'll kill whoever, you know, like the harder stuff. That is going to resonate more with people at that stage in the buyer's journey. So once you have figured out what makes the most sense monetarily for your firm, the next phase is to think about the buyer and what is going to appeal to them the most.
I don't know if you saw that question in the chat, but it was just asked about like the difference between using long tail versus, you know, dense keywords versus just like short head type of terms. And they're saying like in metro areas, you know, what typically have you seen work best today? I know that that's going to depend, but that just came in as you were talking
Mm-hmm.
about that.
So I think the long tail keywords are especially helpful with firms who have a smaller budget because they can be a lot higher intent than the shorter keywords that kind of everyone is bidding on. And so they're going to be more expensive. Like even if you have a long tail keyword that doesn't have as high of a search volume, that probably also means it doesn't cost as much money, even though the person searching is probably ready to go to file. So I personally love long tail keywords. That's most of my campaigns. I focus on longer tail. I think a lot of people kind of sleep on them as far as a useful tool in the arsenal, but it's a good way if you have a small budget to really be able to maximize it and focus on winning, like winning the battle of each auction versus the overall war. Like you can't go up against a multi-million dollar firm, right, and win every time if you're a smaller fish. But if you pick the battles that you definitely want to be appearing for, you can win those in the auction if you're really intentional about it.
You want to weigh in and add to that, Bo?
Yeah, sure. You're going to hear me say these two words a lot today. It depends, right? Anything in marketing, and I know a lot of people hear that, but I agree with everything Kate said. I think what you need to realize with keyword targeting is that there's a positive correlation between how targeted a keyword is and typically how expensive it's going to be. There's just this like the more exact match long tail you use, sometimes you're gonna pay a premium on that click. So that's something to keep in mind if that's going to be your strategy of choice to like build out, solely long tail exact match keywords. I've seen a hybrid model work well where you have a combination of long tail, exact match, and then you're also doing some broad match as well, with the caveat that broad match, um, if you're going to run that, you need to be incredibly proactive with adding negative keywords to make sure that you are not blowing budget on irrelevant searches. We just did an audit for a new client a couple weeks ago, and something like 60% of their broad match budget was going on competitor searches.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like just such poor quality traffic. You really think someone searching Morgan and Morgan wants to talk to your firm? That's just not, it doesn't align to their intent, right? And I know competitive conquest campaigns are still pretty prevalent, but like in our experience, they just don't work well. Anyway, that's a separate topic that we'll get to. But broad match done right can actually help you drive pretty efficient, high quality traffic. You just have to be, again, really diligent with the negative keywords. And then you also need to make sure that your conversion data is like rock solid. Like everything that's being tracked as a call is actually a call. I would actually recommend if you're tracking calls in Google Ads, put a time restraint on it. Don't track calls that are 2 minutes or less. Like if it's 2 minutes or less, an intake didn't happen.
Mhm.
It probably was a vendor calling. It probably was a salesperson calling, right? So put some layers on that tracking to make sure that it's actually quality leads. Same thing with like form submits. If you don't have a CAPTCHA element on your form, you're you're running the risk of getting heightened spam leads from your Google Ads investment. So like that's something to consider too. It might hurt your conversion rate a little bit because you're adding a step to the form, but if it cuts out the, possibility of getting spam leads, might be worth it, right? So all that is to say, I think long tail can work, broad match can work as well if done correctly.
Yeah, agree 100%. I like broad match keywords a lot. I use them a lot, but for the campaigns that I use them, I'm also in the search terms report every day. And every day without fail, there's at least like 30 irrelevant search terms that came in from the previous day. And just for anyone who might not know, so you have the search keywords that you bid on, but then there's also a search terms report that shows the queries that you actually appeared for. So you want to go, like, if you do one thing to optimize your Google Ads account every day, it should be to go into that search term report, look at what your ads are actually appearing on. And if there's anything irrelevant, negative it out. And that's like the fastest way you're going to get better quality traffic and save money.
Agreed. And if I can add one or a couple things, if you're going to run broad match, do research on your competitors first, get it like an initial set of competitors listed, and then
Mhm.
add those proactively as negatives before you even launch broad match. And the other thing I'll say too is if you, let's say you don't have as much time to be watching the search terms, on a daily basis, you can use a tool called Google Ads Scripts and set up logic that basically says it's essentially if then statements. If this search term gets 50 clicks and no conversions, add that search term as a negative keyword. We like using that because sometimes we're looking at the data on like a week to week basis, but we'll put scripts in place on like longer time horizons that are like, if this search term hasn't gotten a conversion in the last 90 days, automatically added as a negative. And we're always checking that automation to make sure that it's not doing things that could hurt the account's performance. But Google Ad Scripts can be another fail safe that you put in place to ensure that your broad match doesn't kind of spend like crazy.
Mhm.
Great stuff. We're talking a lot about some of the data. I want to move a little bit into some of the primary and key metrics that we should also be looking at as you're managing spend and ensuring that you're capturing the market share that's going to meet your goals. And, I know a lot of firms that will come to me and they'll talk about, well, Bob or Mary down the street, their average cost per click is so much less or so much more than mine. And like trying to figure out, like, again, why is my acquisition cost so much higher than yours, and like what they are including in those types of calculations to understand like what it's going to take to drive results. Can you comment on like some of the key metrics and what you include in like some of your acquisition cost formulas so that when firms are, watching agencies do this on their behalf, they've got a little bit of more direction as to, hey, things are going astray or things are on the right track?
Bo, do you want to start that one?
Sure. So I'll start with the idea of lead versus lag KPIs.
Okay.
So I would break down the metrics into those two categories, right? Lead KPIs, those are key performance indicators that you can use in a more immediate time frame to make optimizations. Whereas lag KPIs, they need a longer time horizon to really assess properly, but then you'll make bigger decisions with those lag KPIs, things like budgeting, targeting, so on and so forth. So the core lead KPIs would be things like impressions, clicks, click-through rate, cost, CPC, like all of the Google Ads metrics that you're going to hear commonly about. Those are metrics that you can use. For example, click-through rate you would use to gauge the efficacy of your ad messaging. If you have a low click-through rate on an ad, odds are that you need to optimize that. And that's not something that you need to wait very much time on. If your click-through rate was 10% and then you changed the ad and then it went down to 7%, I would say revert back to the original ad and then start testing new ad messaging, right?
Mhm.
Other things to look at would be your conversion rate on the traffic. So the ratio of leads to clicks, a lead being a phone call, web form, or a live chat. Um, I would look at the cost per lead. I would look at the leads by lead type. I think that's something that a lot of firms forget to look at. Like they'll go into Google Ads and they'll see, I got 100 conversions last month, but like what's the breakdown by the three core different lead types? How many phone calls did you get? How many form submits? How many live chats? So that's all like the lead KPIs. Those are things that you can be analyzing over a shorter time frame. The lag KPIs are probably more important, I would argue. Things like qualified leads, right? How many potential, based on the lead data that I have for all my leads, how many of them were actual viable cases that I could have signed up, right? That's a really important metric to be tracking. Um, the cost per qualified lead, the cases, like if you're spending all this money on Google Ads and LSA, you're not getting cases. Who cares about all the other metrics I just mentioned, right? Like it just doesn't matter. Your cost per case, and then really like the ideal would be to know what your true return on ad spend is. And there's ways to track this. Typically, what we're recommending our clients do, they push their Google Click ID into their CRM. That Click ID follows the case through its life cycle. And then once it's monetized, once it's settled and a check is received, you can then attribute that revenue all the way back to the originating click, right? So again, lead KPIs, those are the more front end metrics. You can use those to optimize in real time. But the lag KPIs, those are the ones that ultimately matter. Those are the ones that are going to tell you, do I drop my budget? Do I raise my budget? You need to make sure that you're tracking both.
Yeah, and I love what you just said about the importance of not just looking at the cost per acquisition, but the actual ROI, the return on the ad spend that comes through. I know that's a pain because for a lot of practice areas, you have to wait longer to get that data. But at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? Like if your cost per acquisition is $4,000, but your return on ad spend is $20,000, then that's worth it, right? It's worth it to continue running that campaign. So it takes more time, but that is the best way to get like a true measurement of whether or not your campaigns are effective.
Yep.
All of the metrics you just mentioned, totally agree with. Another thing that I like to look at, especially when a campaign is just starting and you're trying to figure out your budget and what the threshold should be, I like to look at this search impression share within Auction Insights. And that's going to tell you how often your ad is appearing compared to the other competitors in the auction. So I like my campaigns to have a search impression share of at least 20%. So that would mean if your ad is eligible to appear 100 times, you want it to appear at least 20 out of those 100 times. And that's typically a good indicator that your budget's in a solid place and any other changes or ways to improve your campaign isn't going to be budget dependent. It's going to depend on the actual optimizations and work you're doing within the campaign. So I will say if you have an agency or a marketer who's telling you, hey, we need more budget, it's the only way we're going to improve this campaign. And you ask what the search impression share is, and it's like 38%. It's probably not true. There's more that they can be doing within the campaign to improve results for you.
All right, I'm going to try to not make the same mistake as we did the last time. I've got about half a dozen questions that have been pulled up. We'll try to get to them all. I'm going to go in order that they were received. Real quick in the chat, Seth, if you could just confirm if target CPA is cost per action or acquisition in the chat. We'll get to that one next, but we have a question here around like how you're handling multi-touch attribution, right? The client's journey is not linear. So sometimes you'll see people that have called from a Google business profile, but then they might submit a form via the Google Ads click. Like, how are you tackling that in your reporting, or are you?
I can take that if that's okay to start.
Oh, yeah.
Well, number one, make sure that you have all the tracking set up, right? Like none of the attribution is going to work if you're not tracking all of your leads, your phone calls, so on and so forth. Um, I would recommend looking at different attribution lenses. Obviously, with Google Ads, if we're talking about search campaigns, it makes sense to look at a last click lens. But if you are starting to kind of branch out and go after more, mid funnel, top of funnel tactics, you're going to want to look at other attribution lenses, if possible. So things linear, things like first click. The other thing I would look at too is if you're like running more mid and top of funnel investments, you can look at things like your direct traffic to website. You can look at your branded search traffic over time. If your ads are hitting newer audiences that are discovering you for the first time, you can deduce that more and more people will be searching for your brand over time, right? So that's why I think, branded search volume is a good barometer of whether or not the those more top of funnel investments are doing their job. Just the one thing I'll say though is do not, if you're going to run like a YouTube ad to cold traffic, people that, have never heard of your firm before, or they haven't done any web behavior that indicates that they're ready to speak with an attorney, you cannot grade that on a last click cost per lead basis. If you do, you're going to do what I've seen multiple firms do. You're going to run it for a week, say this campaign sucks, it's not driving results, and you're going to pause it and you're back to square one. If you're going to run a campaign like that, you need to be tracking things like views, cost per view. You can still look at things like traffic. You should be looking at your bounce rate to see if, that traffic is rejecting the content that you're pushing towards them. And then the other thing too would be what is your like goal with that tactic, right? If it's just views and awareness, then keep using views, cost per view as your metric to analyze that. But like if you have other micro conversion events on your website, like for example, if you have a free guide for if you're like a workers' compensation firm and you want to give away a work injury prevention guide in exchange for an email, that type of micro conversion event typically works very well with a more top of funnel campaign like a YouTube or a Facebook ad, because most people that are seeing those ads are not in the market for an attorney yet, right? People don't go on YouTube. Most people don't go on YouTube to find an attorney. Most people aren't on Meta to find an attorney, right? They're on there to message their friends and watch cat videos. So you have to kind of think about the audience. You have to think about where they are in their journey. I know that's very long-winded, but I hope I gave you enough ammunition of things to look at in regards to multi-touch attribution. The last thing I'll say is like you could go out and like pay for a really fancy attribution tool, drop hundreds of thousands of dollars to kind of do all that mapping for you. But I think if you are looking at a few different attribution lenses, make sure that in your intakes that you're asking, how did you hear about us? Because that's a different question than what was the last touch point that they
Mhm.
had before they contacted us, right? And you can track both of those things. You can use Google Analytics and Google Ads to see what the last touch was, but then marry that up against the data that you're collecting in intake, which is how'd you hear about us? Someone might have clicked on your site through a Google search, but they might have seen you, in a billboard, and that's what they said on the phone. Oh yeah, I saw your billboard. I looked you guys up on Google. That's why I called you. In that case, give fractional credit to the billboard ad, right? Give fractional credit to the last touch too. But there are things that you can implement in your firm's kind of process to figure that out yourself. You don't need to go pay for a fancy attribution tool to figure some of this stuff out.
I can
Yeah,
encourage firms more to collect both qualitative and the quantitative data to marry both. Go ahead, add on, Kate.
no, I was totally going to agree with that. Something that I did at a previous firm was when people got to the last question on the form,
Mhm.
there would be a hidden fields that appeared that said check all the ways you heard about us, and that is going to help you with attribution, and it's also going to help measure traditional media that is a lot harder to quantify than the digital stuff. So it's a win-win. Um, and then my other recommendation, if you're running Google Ads, you also have to have a Google Analytics 4 account. You have to make sure that's set up because that is going to give you a lot of information as far as how many times someone interacted with your brand before they committed a conversion, what the funnel was, if they did a direct search 3 times and then wound up hitting a paid ad, and that's where they converted. Google Analytics 4 is going to be able to give you a lot of that information. And to Bo's point, that information is free. Like you can do that yourself. You don't have to pay someone to do it for you.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to go back to the other question about target CPA, which they clarified was more cost per action. So chat, form, call. Yeah. We have estate, divorce, PI, and employment on the call. So for a firm that is just starting out, so if we don't have historical data, let's assume that they're investing at least $3,000 to $5,000. Like, what would you recommend as a good target cost per acquisition action for that type of campaign? If you have anything to share.
Oh gosh, it's such a
I know
loaded
it's
question.
I know it's so hard. It depends, right? I mean, I think the first thing you have to look at is what you expect to make on the back end of those cases. And whatever that number is, you want your costs per action, specifically an acquisition, right? To be like, I would like it to be 3 or 4 times lower than whatever it is that you're going to make on the back end of that case. But again, it depends on the geography. It depends on how competitive the space is. I know that's such an annoying answer that it depends, but I do think any company that will hear a question like that and then give you like a exact number, like here's the amount, like this is what we guarantee, that's typically a red flag because it's dependent on so many different variables, like what keywords are you bidding on, who else is bidding in the auction, seasonality is a factor. Like going into the holidays, it's actually I've found for lawyers it's kind of a steady time, but like in the summer, like things traffic really drops off. So I'm sorry to go with the it depends, but it truly does.
The one thing I would say, we talked about this before, is anyone on this call can go and set up a Google Ads account. Doesn't cost you anything. Go set it up, go to the keyword planner, pick out some of the keywords that you'd be interested in targeting and get a handle on the estimated cost. One thing I'm happy to share following the webinar is we use this ROI calculator in Google Sheets. We will actually copy and paste the data from Keyword Planner, paste it into a table, hit refresh, and all of the calculations will update. And then you can mess with the ratios of what are you expecting in terms of conversion rate on the traffic, right? So the ratio of leads that you're generating from the clicks, and then what is your expected close rate on that traffic, right? So you'll be able to see the calculations and kind of back into that and figure out, is this something that's even going to make sense given my $3,000 or $5,000 budget, right? So I'm happy to share that following the webinar. We can send out an email with that calculator, and I can put like a short little Loom video in there to show you how to put that data into the tool.
Awesome. All right, they keep coming. This one is about quality scores, how they hurt and benefit your spend. You want to start that one off, Kate?
Yeah, I love a quality score. So for anyone who doesn't know, Google quality scores are based on 3 factors. Budget is one. Another is how relevant your ad copy is to the keyword that you're bidding on. And then the third is how relevant the ad copy is compared to the landing page, right? And you want to make sure Google gives you a score 0 out of 10. You want to be 10s across the board, ideally. I don't think it's actually possible. I don't think that Google actually will do that. But the higher you can get the other 2 factors, like how closely your ad copy matches the keyword and how closely your ad copy matches your landing page, the more leeway you're going to have with your budget. I'm not going to say it makes enormous difference. Like if someone has twice the budget that you do, like they're probably still going to win in the auction. But if you have someone that you are a very close competitor with and you have a similar ad budget, or even if they spend a little bit more than you, a way to get an edge is to really focus on that ad copy and on that landing page. I go a little nuts with landing pages. I ideally like to have one landing page per ad group so that I can get as specific as possible with the different keywords. So it's a way to appease the Google gods, but it's nice like if someone's searching for, Atlanta divorce lawyer, right? And if they land on a landing page that says, Atlanta divorce lawyer, it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. There's like a subconscious kind of psychological thing that happens as well.
Yeah, I would say quality score is Google's incentive to advertisers to make uh, the user experience as relevant and high quality as possible, right? And so it's a no-brainer. Like if you're going to target personal injury lawyer, Baltimore, Maryland, make sure your ad says that in the headline and land them on a landing page that says personal injury lawyer, Baltimore, Maryland, right? And the incentive comes in the form of a lower cost per click. The higher your Q score is, Google's going to reward you with a lower cost per click. And then on the post-click end, if you're providing them a relevant user experience, you should assume that your conversion rates are going to be better too. So it's this like double whammy effect. If you optimize that Q score, lower CPC, higher conversion rate, that's going to mean more leads at a cheaper cost per lead, and ultimately it should equate to a lower cost per case, right? So do not sleep on Q score. It's something that you can always be optimizing. You can always be leveling up your ad
Mhm.
messaging, your landing pages. Ron, I think you had a question later about like, optimizing ads and landing pages. The
Mhm.
reality is you need to be running consistent A/B testing on ads and landing pages. If
Yeah.
you're not trying. If your agency is not running A/B ad tests, they're not trying. If they're not doing A/B landing page tests to try to level up and just get an incremental gain, a slight incremental gain on the conversion rate, they're not trying. That is work that you should be doing consistently.
All right, I'm going to try to go rapid fire here because we've now got additional three questions. We're going to try to wrap up four. I think I know the answer to this one, but I'll let you guys knock it out of the park here. It's talking about like getting return on investment and on ad spend. It takes so many touches before like a suspect finally becomes a prospect. But when the call comes in, how are you both handling like poor intake and poor discovery on the firm's behalf? You've done all this work to get them a lead, and now they're dropping the ball at the 1 yard line essentially. Like how do you help there, and what do you do? You want to go first, Kate?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a problem with every law firm, even law firms that have great intake departments. There's always room for improvement. One thing you can do that is helpful is listen to the calls specifically that come in. And it's a great opportunity to be able to coach the firm's intake team or to pick up on trends, make recommendations for, hey, the question is being phrased this way, you should try phrasing it that way. It's and hopefully the firm is receptive to it. If to your point, if they're spending all this money right on ads, it absolutely makes sense that they want their intake to be as strong as possible. So I think just listening to recordings and using that to your advantage and to illustrate problems that you're seeing is a very compelling way to get changes made to the firm's intake department.
Cool. You want to add,
Agreed.
Bob?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what I said before about lag KPIs. This intake thing is a key reason why you need to be tracking qualified leads, meaning your marketing people need to be understanding the number of potential cases that they sent to you, right? And for example, let's say, month over month case volume drops 20%, but qualified lead volume remains stagnant. It stayed the same. That to me is an indication that there's something wrong with intake. If we teed up the same number of potential cases and for some reason the law firm didn't kind of close those, get those signed up, that to me is an indication that there's an issue with intake. So it's really helpful to have all this tracked so that you can pinpoint at any given point in time, whether it's on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, hey, like our case volume's down. The knee-jerk reaction is to be like, well, marketing's broken, like that,
Mhm.
or it's our ad campaigns. It's like, no, you need to pull back the onion, pull back layers of the onion a little bit and see this could be an intake issue. Were more people out this quarter on PTO versus prior quarters? Did we migrate phone systems? Did we change our intake forms? Things like that, right? So you really need to make sure that you're tracking this so that you can effectively diagnose whether it is a marketing issue, an intake issue, and in some instances, it can be both. right? But you just need to make sure that you have those metrics to tell you the true story.
Yeah, especially time of day metrics are really useful. Like I was working with a firm that saw this huge drop in just leads coming in, not even like signed cases, but leads coming in between specifically noon and 2 p.m. And it was, they came to marketing and, what's going on? Is it more competitive that time of day? Is something happening with the campaigns where performance is dropping off? And we dug into it, and it turned out to be a lunch break problem. Like they weren't staggering when the intake team took lunch. So if there were typically 5 people on the phones, there would be like only one person on the phone in between that time frame. So something as silly as lunch, right? Like that can have a huge impact on your ROI and on the cases coming in. So the more granular you can get with your targeting, the better, as far as tracking goes for intake.
All right. A little bit more specific here. This is Elder Estate Planning Firm in Kentucky. Are there signs that you are overspending? I have 74% search impression share, 57% absolute top, and a 10% conversion over the last 30 days. Is that an indication that my money is being well spent?
What's your cost per case? Is it increasing? Like that would be my immediate question. That should be kind of the true north that guides, your worries. If your cost per case is still at an acceptable level, I don't think it's cause for concern. But that would be my immediate question is, are you happy with your acquisition costs? Are you happy with what you're paying per case?
Yeah, and if you are, then even then you can probably start backing off on budget. I would do it little by little. I would do it in, I don't like to change budget more than 20% at a time because it can really throw things out of whack. But you can start backing off maybe 5 or 10% a month and see at what point your cost per acquisition starts to reach a point you don't like.
Mhm.
My guess without looking at your account would be you could probably move some of that money to a different channel or a different campaign.
I think we have time for one more here. Thoughts on dynamic landing pages with keyword insertion? Yay or nay?
You
How
want
do
to take
you
that,
feel
Kate?
about it?
If it's working properly, then yeah, I think it's great. I always get nervous with anything dynamic that it can break, or the worst possible is like, you know, lawyer in dynamic state inserted here. Like you don't want that to appear. But if it's working, just make sure you're staying on top of it, that nothing's broken. But if it's not and everything is appearing the way it should, I think it's great. And test it. I mean, A/B test it, but I think it's definitely worthwhile.
I agree with everything Kate said. I have nothing to add.
All right, perfect. With about 90 seconds to spare, if both of you can just tell people where they can find some more information, how they can reach out and contact you. I want to thank you both for all of your insights. I thought it was incredibly valuable. I learned even a lot more today. So just let people know where to find you. What's the best place to get in touch with you if they have any additional questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this, Ron. This was super fun and it was great about to chat with you. You can follow Very Decent Marketer. That's our website URL. It's our Instagram. It's our LinkedIn. It's our YouTube. Our YouTube in particular has a lot of good like PPC specific videos in addition to social media videos and just overall marketing. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out. I love to talk about this stuff. So happy to chat.
Oh,
Ron, thank you very much, Ron. Thank you everyone for joining today. I know everyone's super busy. Um, you can find out more about my agency by going to legal.paretopppc.com or just type in Pareto Legal. We'll come up at the top of the search result pages. For everyone that joined today, we're going to be giving away a complimentary ads assessment. So if you are interested in that, we'll get your information following the webinar, and we'll be able to provide you with a complimentary assessment of your Google Ads and LSA channels. And then the other thing too that I will be providing, as I promised, if people are interested, I will give you our ROI calculator template with some instructions. So if you haven't run Google Ads yet, I'll give you a little tutorial on how you can forecast costs, expected leads, so on and so forth.
awesome. Thank you so much. And if I should keep doing these, head over to LegalFenix or find me at on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to continue hosting them. But thank you again, Bo, Kate. Really appreciate it, and hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.